Yeah, Thames Estuary, a strong case for improved connectivity. That's what I'm talking about. So very much on the local needs. The area that we're looking at in the estuary in North Kent and South Essex is quite densely populated. So my first slide is really to evidence what's going on. The top left-hand slide there is Gravesend. And as some of you know, there's a few thousand new homes going up there. And those few thousand new homes are being constructed with one car parking space per two properties. Guess what that's going to do? If anybody wants to drive, they're not going to, unless they happen to be lucky enough to find a parking space somewhere in the vicinity. It's very much transport dependent. And those who know the area know that the few thousand new homes have one road in and out. Essentially it's a cul-de-sac, and not only that, the one road in and out joins the ring road in Gravesend. We will see where the transport training's gone with that, but it'll be quite interesting to see the long queues during the day. There is a potential for a railway station there. There's a railway line that goes through, and there used to be a railway station there. No plans at the moment to reinstate the railway station, which could have a bit of, might be useful if you're building a few thousand homes to have some sort of decent transport. So we have that going on the south side, and incidentally those properties that are being built with one parking space per two properties are being built with bicycle parking, one per bedroom. So you have a few thousand properties, each with one cycle parking space per bedroom. It could very much start looking a bit like going Dutch. The picture down below is on the Essex side. There we have, again, high density construction, low numbers of parking spaces compared to the number of properties going up. And again, we're in a situation, you've got all of these properties going up. So what's happening in Essex? Well, they thought about it. That development runs for several kilometres along what was the old main A13 into London. There is a new A13 which is used by all the traffic and regularly becomes a bit like a parking lot. The old A13 trunk road has been divided into bus lanes with the traffic running through the centre two lanes, and it's straight as a die. It's fantastic. What's happened with the planning is there is a railway station that serves one end of the development at Dagenham Dock, and we're building a few thousand new homes, let's build another railway station at the other end of the development. So there's two heavy rail stations to serve that development there. That photograph I took on the upper deck of a 174 bus as I was going to our offices in Rainham at Seymour. The bus was quite busy already, and that was only 2 or 3 weeks ago, and it was pretty full and people were piling out. When all of those new homes are filled, the transport system, despite the heavy rail connections and 2 railway stations, looks as if it might get a bit interesting. The other small picture I've got on my slide is the new A to Z bus. It's nothing to do with any sort of maps, it's to do with Amazon. That runs between Dartford and Gravesend, which is the patch that we've been looking at. There are already buses that do the route. There's the fast track bus, which runs every 15 minutes, and there's an Arriva 480 bus, which does a similar sort of routing. This bus, which has just been introduced, is a 24-hour bus. That's been introduced with a 24-hour running, an underlying frequency of every half an hour, and during rush hours for workers to get to work, it runs every 15 minutes, and that's for about 3 hours in the morning and 3 hours in the evening. That half an hour frequency goes up to every 15 minutes, and that's along with the existing 2 buses that run along the route. So this is really to set the scene in terms of the area that we're looking at for bringing in a tram line. And we can see high density population, heavy dependency on public transport, heavy use of public transport already, and there are more homes going up. This is a map of our proposal, and you can see there in yellow various opportunity areas where there's new developments, where it's homes, where it's jobs, where it's businesses, etc. We touch on a regional shopping centre directly into Lakeside. We tie into the new TV and film studios. I don't think they'll be quite as large as Salford Quays, but you start to get the picture, and I think there's another 5,000 or 6,000 homes to be built just around the TV studios. And we also touch on Gray's town centre here. We touch on Estuary International Station on the south side of the river, and we go through to Gravesend along a route that previously was used by a tramway. And we go to the east of Gravesend, where you saw those tower blocks that are basically in a cul-de-sac, 5,000 homes in a cul-de-sac. And I think the transport plan is, let's lay on a little shuttle bus. Okay. So that's roughly where we are, and we've got a catchment there. I think that one shows it's 500 metres, about 5 minutes walk. A kilometre will give us 10 minutes as the catchment. Once all the new properties are built out, we've probably got about 100,000 plus residents within a 10-minute walk of the line. We also connect with various bus interchanges. We have the support of Ensign Bus on the Essex side. We have the support of Aviva on the Kent side. We've been speaking with Kent County Council. They're happy as long as we don't compete with Fast Track. Fine. We can do that. And we touch on the rail stations. And the rail stations we touch on there currently have, or pre-COVID, have about 13 million entrances and exits per annum. And that's a 200% increase over the last 20 years in entrances and exits on the local rail services. The station up by Chafford 100 was a brand new station, opened to service the regional shopping centre and housing. That now has a throughput of about 2.5 to 3 million people, and it's on a single line. There's a passing loop on it, but it's a single line. It's a single line station. There's about 2.5 million people using it. That is quite busy. So that again is setting the scene for the area and the amount of potential demand. In addition to what I've already mentioned, you have the Thames Freeport, which are creating about 25,000 jobs. Every time I speak with them, they say, don't forget to put the Freeport on the map. Well, I will do, but it's there. And it's Tilbury's off to the right there, and it's Tilbury Docks and the Thames Freeport, etc. And the Dartford crossing carries about 50 to 55 million crossings a year. We know from Highways England figures that around 15 million of those crossings are just going from one side of the river to the other, local journeys, which could quite easily move to across-river public transport. Then we know from our own studies that those who can't drive can't actually make up any of those numbers. We know that there is frustrated demand where people want to get across but can't get across. So in addition to modal shift and existing vehicle crossings, we can actually pick up a lot of fresh crossings where people do want to get across but are physically unable to do so at the moment. Unless, of course, you jump in a taxi and pay £20 for the privilege going each way, or you find a friend that will take you across the Dartford crossing. Connectivity. Connectivity, very important. And what we have at the moment, and I've mentioned on this slide the 13 million users on the local rail stations that we would interchange with. We've got frequent services, C2C line, essentially there are 15-minute services running backwards and forwards, not on the Tilbury loop which goes east of Grays, but certainly coming down into Grays. Similar scenario in North Kent, we have Southeastern and Thameslink services running back and forth, and we have high-speed services going into Gravesend and Estuary International. So a lot of demand, a lot of usage, but there's this blue line in the middle, which means you can't actually get from one side to the other very easily, which is a problem. And the thing to remember on this, and you know, we get asked about this, you know, how many people are going to use it, etc. And there's something called the Marchetti's constant, which is, I think, Cesare Marchetti. And he undertook a study. He said the average reasonable commute is about 13 minutes each way. If you can get the commuting time down, people will use that transport. If you can get a reasonable average commute to 30 minutes, certainly less than 45 minutes, down to 30 minutes, you start to see people using that type of transport. And by putting in a 10-minute, maximum 10-minute tramway connection between Estuary and Grays, 10 minutes is not all right for 30 minutes. That gives you a lot of extra time when you can actually get to the office or jump on a bus or whatever. But what it does do, it avoids the 45 minutes on a good day, a couple of hours on a bad day, run around on the car. If you've got a comparison of a 30-minute journey using a tram or an hour and a half journey but using a car, I think generally speaking if you actually use the tram. And the examples I've given there is the Woolwich Arsenal Docklands Light Railway. That opened probably over 10 years now. First year that took 5 million passengers. After 10 years, the Woolwich Arsenal Docklands Light Railway was carrying 15 million passengers across the river. HS1, again, similar sort of time frame, 2009, 2010, I think it opened. HS1, they think, right, HS1 is a premium brand really, and you pay an extra, pay a supplement for it. Who's going to pay a supplement? Well, that now has a 15-minute service from Estuary International. If it's a 6-car service, you are standing. If it's a 12-car service, you might just get a seat. So the reason Marchetti's constant, if you can get from Estuary International into St Pancras in 20 minutes, all of a sudden it doesn't quite matter if you're paying a little bit extra, particularly if you're going to London and you can earn a bit extra. All of a sudden it gets used. So what we now see at Estuary International, it's busy, and I think of it as a high-speed metro line. You jump on it, and before you know it, you're at Stratford, or then you're in St Pancras, and it's down to the time zone. And that's where we come in making that short connection, which makes it so much quicker for people to get through. And we've worked with Gravesham District Council. We looked at their work that they did in terms of where people live and where they go to work from the last census information, and everybody's going west. There's some going down, maybe a few going across. It's all to do with time, and basically what you would expect to see, if you have a tramway there, what we would expect to see, remember there's 26,000 jobs that are going up there with the Thames Estuary, Freeport. If you can just make that connection, we think that there will be quite a lot of demand for that, because rather than go all the way out there, they can actually cross the river within 10, 15 minutes, and then they can get to the jobs when they get to the regional shopping centre as well. So, next slide. This is sort of another underlying theme of the area. South Essex, there is a shortage of workers. North Kent, there is a shortage of jobs. Okay, what do we do about that? Well, the problem with South Essex is, it's not really a problem, is that a lot of people commute to London. So a lot of the people who live in South Essex would just jump on the train and go into London. So that actually leaves a shortage of workers in South Essex to fill all the jobs and the 26,000 jobs that are coming up the Thames Freeport and the TV and film studios, etc. North Kent, got some new housing. Oh, hang on a minute, we need a few jobs for them to go to. Okay, so there is a mismatch, and it's recognised that a lot of the shortage is actually on relatively unskilled work. People who don't happen to own a car, people who need to use public transport, and particularly the dark blue area where our little yellow line goes through, that's in the 10% most deprived areas in the country. Oh, and there's another bit over there up there on the right-hand side. And part of the reason is lack of connectivity. So, I think I missed one there. I was looking for, yeah, done that. Okay, so Thames Estuary 2050 Growth Commission. They, looking at the Lower Thames crossing, they mentioned that in order to future-proof the proposed crossing, the design should not preclude future delivery of infrastructure to support rail transport links. I'm sure they were thinking heavy rail because it says rail, so it's heavy rail. Yeah. So that was mentioned there, and there was a Parsons-Brinckerhoff study behind the Lower Thames crossing as well, which goes back to 2009, and they looked at the rail option. Again, didn't think of light rail, hadn't even thought of light rail. You know, what's rail? That's heavy rail. No, there is light rail, but Parsons-Brinckerhoff also ignored light rail. And the time was a bit unfortunate. 2009 was just at the time when HS1 was just coming on stream. It was the time when the DLR connection was just coming on stream. They also mentioned Crossrail, but that's another issue. So what they didn't have in 2009 was evidence of what happens when you put a new sustainable rail crossing across the river. So they didn't have any evidence on the DLR. They didn't know that just by connecting two sides of the river in East London by a light railway would suddenly create 15 million passengers a year. Well, it took 10 years. They looked at HS1. They didn't know that High Speed 1 would suddenly become a 15-minute service with 6 car trains being up to standing and 12 car trains needed to allow people to sit. They didn't have the benefit of that. What they did say was that there aren't many people going between Medway and South Essex. Well, that's strange, isn't it? If there's no provision for public transport to do it, you're not really going to get many people. And if your alternative is a drive up the A2, okay, so that's a long journey. Think of Marchetti's principle, you're going to be over your 30 minutes even before you get to the Dartford Crossing. You go across the Dartford Crossing, you're about double that. Of course, people aren't going to commute from Medway towns to South Essex. The tramway would save half an hour on the journey. So, I think this is my final slide. Yeah. Oh, crikey. Sorry, I missed it out. So, National Planning Policy Framework. Thank you. Can we maximise that? Yes, we can. Thank you. It works. So, National Planning Policy Framework. Right, you've got 3 overarching objectives. Economic. In the economic piece, it says identifying and coordinating the provision of infrastructure. So that sort of means you've got to look at what you need and then that's the identification, then coordinate what you provide. So you've got to work out what's happening locally. And then you have the social objective, which I think... social objective, so not quite sure what happened there. So social objective, of course, the light rail works with that as well. So that's pretty packed. That's my wallpaper.
You killed it, Gordon.
Right, thank you. And then the last one, environmental objective. So protecting and enhancing our natural built and historic environment, blah, 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 blah. Okay, minimising waste and pollution and mitigating and adapting to climate change. So the answer is a road then, isn't it? Well, some people think so. Not sure a road necessarily fits all of those three, indeed any of them. So that's sort of where we're at. And just to come back onto the type of area that we're talking about, when we looked at the census statistics, Less than 30% of homes had access to a car in the last census. We know that less than 50% of people in the area we're looking at drive. So the answer's a road then. No, maybe not. So that's where we think we have quite a strong case on this. We are in a high density urban area, low car ownership. We are in an area that needs that connectivity through public transport, and Andrew alluded to it earlier on. I think it's integrated. You have the heavy rail that's in place. You've got bus lines there and being increased. What we're missing is the middle bit, the light rail, and the light rail I think will make the area sing, and it will provide a fully integrated public transport. And if we can have the one key or card or whatever it is so you can travel around the entire area, that would be brilliant.